January 27, 1756, the assistant conductor of the court orchestra in Salzburg celebrated the birth of a son. This boy, the second surviving child of Leopold Mozart and his wife Anna Maria, was called Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgang Gottlieb. Gottlieb is German for beloved of God, in Latin, Amadeus. As a grown man, he would sign himself Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, or just Mozart. Leopold began instructing his daughter, Nannerl, at the keyboard when she was just 7, often with her toddler brother underfoot.
Wolfgang often spent much time at the clavier, picking out thirds which he was always striking, and his pleasure showed that it sounded good.
Leopold undertook plans to take both prodigies on concert tours to the courts of Europe. The first trip, just before Wolfgang's 6th birthday, was a 3-week journey to Munich, a success which inspired Leopold to set his sights on Vienna, one of the major cultural centers of Europe. The family set out in September 1762, and upon landing at Vienna's Danube Canal pier, Wolfgang sped their passage through customs by pulling out his fiddle and charming the inspector with a minuet. Even their father was surprised at their reception in Vienna.
We are already being talked of everywhere. Everyone is amazed, especially at the boy, and everyone whom I have heard says that his genius is incomprehensible. Their Majesties received us with such extraordinary graciousness that, when I tell of it, people will declare that I have made it up. Suffice it to say that Wolfworld jumped up on the Empress's lap, put his arms around her neck, and kissed her heartily.
The pattern established here would eventually be repeated all over Europe. Performances at the most influential local court would be followed by as many concerts as possible, often 2 a day, for the lesser nobility who competed to entertain one another with an appearance by the miracle children of Salzburg.
Today we were at the French ambassador's. Tomorrow we are invited to Count Herrick's from 4 to 6. But which Count Herrick he is, I do not know. I shall see where the carriage takes us to. The nobles send us their invitations 4, 5, 6 to 8 days in advance in order not to miss us.
In the summer of 1763, the entire family set out for France for a tour which would last more than 3 years. Upon reaching Paris, Leopold wasted no time in making connections, including a Baron Grimm, whose handwritten newsletter circulated to an elite group of subscribers throughout Europe and served to drum up advance engagements.
His daughter, 11 years of age, plays the harpsichord in the most brilliant manner. She performs the longest and most difficult pieces with an astonishing precision. Her brother, who will be 7 years old next February, is such an extraordinary phenomenon that one is hard put to it to believe what one sees with one's eyes and hears with one's ears.
The French king, Louis XV, invited the Mozarts to Versailles for New Year's Day.
My Wolfgang was graciously privileged to stand beside the Queen the whole time, to talk constantly to her, entertain and kiss her hands repeatedly, besides partaking of dishes which she handed him from the table.
While in Paris, Leopold arranged publication of violin sonatas composed by Wolfgang, his first music to appear in print. The troupe next braved an arduous channel crossing to invade England, where within days they were received by King George III. As was now often the case, Wolfgang was called upon to prove the authenticity of his talent, this time through tests administered by the king himself. In July of 1764, Leopold became seriously ill, which provided the children with an extended rest from performing, time Wolfgang filled with composing music.
In order to occupy himself, Wolfgang composed his first symphony for all the instruments of the orchestra, but especially for trumpets and kettle drums. I had to copy it out as I sat at his side. Whilst he composed and I copied, he said to me, "Remind me to give the horn something worthwhile to do."
Leopold's illness put the family in a precarious financial situation. Advertising in a local newspaper, in which Wolfgang's age was reduced by a year, and publicity appearances at a local tavern did not solve their predicament, and they left London at the end of July 1765. Detouring to Holland for a series of concerts, Wolfgang and his sister both contracted typhoid fever, bringing them near death. After their recovery, the grand tour continued for almost a year, the exhausted family finally reaching home in November, bearing a large number of gold rings, watches, and snuff boxes. Another journey to Vienna in 1767 was highlighted by the emperor's invitation for Mozart to write an opera, but sordid court politics intervened.
The whole hell of music is in revolt to prevent the world from witnessing a child's cleverness.
Leopold was anxious to take his son to Italy while he was still young enough to inspire awe. The two set off for another tour of over a year. The Archbishop of Salzburg had taken Wolfgang into his employment in 1772, but by 1777, the 21-year-old Mozart had his fill of his autocratic, unappreciative employer and secured his release. Leopold's duties kept him home, so this time the son set out with his mother. They remained for a while in Mannheim, where Mozart taught, but also found time to fall in love with a soprano, Aloysia Weber, age 16, an affair which put the young man at odds with his father, who disapproved long distance of most of his son's proclivities.
What is the use, then, of all my precise thinking, all my care and consideration, my paternal efforts and pursuance of a most urgent and weighty enterprise, if you fail to give your father your full confidence? Just when I believe that things are on a better footing and taking their proper course, I am suddenly confronted with some foolish, unforeseen whim of yours. If you are to make a name as a composer, it must be in Paris, Vienna, or Italy.
Wolfgang did find work in Paris, but his mother fell ill with a fever, and he tearfully wrote to his father and sister in July 1778.
I hope you are now prepared to hear some very melancholy and distressing news with fortitude. At 20 minutes past 10 o'clock, my mother fell happily asleep in God.
Heartbroken and homeward bound, Wolfgang stopped off in Munich to see his beloved, who by now was singing in the court opera, but whose affection had cooled considerably. So, on this last trip, the young composer had experienced little success, straining his family's finances and his father's patience. His mother had died, and he'd been disappointed in love. He returned to the Archbishop's employ as court organist in Salzburg and hoped for a better opportunity, which came in 1781 when he was summoned to Vienna, where the Archbishop had taken up residence for the coronation of Emperor Joseph II. This experience led to much insult and resentment, even at meals.
The two valets sit at the head of the table, but I have at least the honor of sitting above the cooks. My Lord Archbishop is most gracious, glorifies himself through his dependents, robs them of their service, and pays them nothing for it.
This was a time when enlightened democratic ideals were gaining ground, and before long Mozart found in Vienna the opportunities to seek his fortune as a freelance musician, composing on commission, teaching music lessons, and arranging concerts for the new ticket-buying public. He not only left the Archbishop's household, but his declaration of independence involved defying his father to marry Aloysia Weber's sister, Constanza. The prodigy was now a man, a mature artist beholden only to his gift, his journey to independence, now an all too brief voyage to immortality.